And we are live. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to She Built It Boss Lady Chronicles. I am Sharita Gaskins-Tillett. I am your host, and this is the show where we feature the extraordinary accomplishments of women who are owning their power to transform their lives. And I am super excited to have our guest tonight. I can't wait to introduce you to her. She is a true powerhouse with so many years of experience and so much knowledge to drop on us. But before we do that, I just want to first give a few minutes for others to come on in. If you are watching us live, please say hi in the comments. I invite you to write your questions in the comments. We would love to answer them. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, still put your questions in the chat because we would still be happy to answer your questions, even if you're not joining us live. I have a couple of announcements. The first is this coming Saturday, November 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I will be hosting a 2025 goal setting workshop. So, goal setting has been one of the things that has transformed my life because it's one thing for you to want something different, to desire something different, but we get caught in our habits and we continue to do the same things over and over again. So, it's not until we take intentional action, purposeful action in a different direction that things begin to change. So if you are looking to make some changes, I invite you to join us for that goal setting workshop. Again, this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. You can find the link in the comments here. I'll make sure that it's there. You also feel free to DM me, and the price is right. It is absolutely positively free. The other announcement is I have the dates for the next A Weekend for Me retreat. I confirmed that this week. It will be October 2nd through October 5th, 2025. We will be going back to Grand Cayman. We had such a great time this year that we wanted to do a repeat. So we will be happy to welcome you there. I will also put a link for the VIP wait list there. Registration is not yet open, but again, I do have those dates now. So save the dates, October 2nd through October 5th, 2025, Grand Cayman. Would love to host you there. Love to see you there. So now, without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight. So our guest is Dr. Michelle Flemmings. Dr. Michelle, I lost your bio. Hold on, here it comes. Dr. Michelle is a healthcare thought leader, change agent, and executive director of market development for healthcare at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. With over 3 decades of experience across bedside patient care, clinical leadership, and industry governance, she brings unparalleled expertise to her role. A graduate of SUNY Syracuse for medical school, Dr. Flemmings completed her internal medicine residency at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in New York City, followed by an emergency medicine residency at The Ohio State University, where she served as chief resident. In her live talks, Dr. Flemming shares insights creating the career you want by aligning personal strengths, values, and goals with the evolving demands of the healthcare industry. Drawing on her extensive experience in digital healthcare and strategic development, she discusses the importance of building meaningful client relationships, using data to drive decision making, and taking charge of your professional path. Welcome, Dr. Michelle.
Thank you, Dr. Gaskins-Tillett. Sharita, it is great to be here. I actually wrote down the dates because, especially after you started reading through the bio, I'm like, no wonder I'm tired. I need a break.
Well,
Oh
I got a little tired reading your bio. I'm gonna tell you the thing that jumped out at me was the 2 residencies. Let's start there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so those who know me know that I'm a bit of a run there and figure it out later kind of kid. I'm a middle child, and I'm a New
Okay.
York City kid rather. And then my folks are immigrants from Jamaica and Costa Rica. So the do it and figure out later thing is in my DNA. I thought that I wanted to be like, and this is probably too old for the crowd, Marcus Welby, the old, the family doc. I thought I wanted that. And the more and more that I got into that, it was the early to mid 80s in New York City, the more I realized that it was completely out of sync with who I am and what I wanted to do. So I decided, New York City kid, I was going to Studio 54, I was doing my dancing and my hanging out. And in those days, I could go out, come in, be ready for rounds the next day and stay up all night on call because, you had the energy in your 20s.
Yes.
But I also needed to pay for looking cute because New York City for clothing wasn't cheap. And I
Right.
took a job in the ER part time and working shifts to make money to support getting some clothes, going out, going on trips, and also paying off the student loan. And it didn't take long for me to realize, I really didn't like being on call. I really didn't like being tethered. And back then it was a beeper. And
Yes.
a couple of them by accident fell into liquids and had to be replaced, or they accidentally dropped and broke. And it was at that point that I thought, I need to go to the ER. So I went back and did a second residency. The other thing, though, is when I came out at the other end of that residency, I realized how poorly skilled I was initially trying to just do it and figure it out. And another point before even going to the residency, what actually was the final push, is they were putting together a residency program at the place where I worked. And when I asked if I was going to be able to be one of the teaching attendings, they were kind enough to say that they loved my credentials and that was going to be very useful for their application. But, you're not trained in EM, so you can do the night shifts, you can do the holidays, you can do the weekends. And at that point, I said,
Wow.
I'm smarter than that. I will remember this. They turned around about 3 years after I finished residency, and that chief of that department asked me if I'd like to be the department head, and I said, love you, enjoyed the work, learned a lot, but I'm smarter now and you can't afford me." And I walked on, never looked back.
So, Justin, you dropped some really good nuggets just in that, what was that, like 30 seconds? I can't even see the clock, but you were like spitting game all over the place. So the first
Oh,
thing
totally.
I want to back up to the fact that you recognize that internal medicine didn't fit you. Now,
Didn't.
there are lots of people in medicine and other careers who maybe have the recognition that something isn't working, but they don't feel that they have the agency to make the change. So I want to know what gave you the nerve, the audacity, the courage, whatever it is that you had to say, you know what? I know I did this whole internal medicine residency, but
Yeah.
I need something else, and it's going to be
Mhm.
ER, and I'm going to go back and do an entire new residency. What gave you
Oh, boy.
that push?
Good question. It was understanding that I really didn't like being on call. I loved my time freedom. I get it that patients are always there. We take an oath to take care and we take an oath to be present. The problem was even then patients were demanding and
Yeah.
there was zero time freedom. I would get calls from morning until who knows when later on in the weekend, even after I'd hand it off, because they'd like to talk to me instead of whoever was on call. It's like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. I appreciate the compliment, but understand that compliment robs me of having a life and
Yeah.
having what we now call balance, but it robs me of having a life. And I don't remember. I think it was the time the lady asked me, pardon me, if I would bring an x-ray machine to the east side of Manhattan to x-ray her ankle because she couldn't possibly go to the emergency department. And, did I know who she was? That my brain just kind of clicked into overload and said, I think that's my hell no moment. No,
Yeah.
no, no,
Absolutely.
and no. And that next day I started applying for residencies. I applied late, actually. I was applying back in October. And so my interviews were really rushed. I had to get a whole bunch of stuff in, and I am forever grateful that I did get the interviews I did. And I did have the support of the residency program once I got in, especially at Ohio State. They were very engaging, very understanding, very supportive of the fact that I was a different person and a different type of candidate.
Yes.
And I think that's something that a lot of us don't realize is we have value in our
Yeah.
experience and our expertise, even if we are not quite done yet. We've been places, we've done things, we've met people, we've had failures, which are so important, and we've learned lessons from those failures. And that's where we need to come forward and be proud of it, not necessarily brag, but be proud of it, own it, and say, I'm not the new guy coming out who thinks that this is, what I'd like to do for now. I know that this is what I want to do because I tried this other thing over here and it put my face in the fact that I was wrong. I now know that I'm right. And I think that little piece of information is enough for the person on the other side of the desk to go, let's give her a chance.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but my question is, how do we develop that sense of self and that sense of value and worth? Because women in medicine, women in general, let's just say that
Hmm.
women in general tend to be devalued in the workplace.
Yeah.
We make less money, we get promoted less. We're just not seen the same as men. So
Mhm.
how do we adopt that? How do we recognize that we actually do have that value? Because I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute. So if you're somebody who has done a residency, you're now an attending, so that means you're making attending money. You have an attending lifestyle, which is a little bit different from, or
Mhm.
maybe a lot different from a resident. You
Oh,
have the
yeah.
respect of being an attending. And then, but to be able to say, well, wait a minute, I know I have all these things, but this is not serving me. There are some people who would say, you made your bed hard, why don't you lay in it, right? That these are the
Mhm.
choices you made, you need to make this work. What gave you, again, how do we see ourselves, how do we begin to value ourselves in a different way, such that we
Mhm.
can look at the situation and say, this isn't working for me, this is my one and only life, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to do things that are aligned with my priorities and my values.
That's almost exactly the conversation I had. My mother was kind of sick of me whining to her about how my life sucked. And she
Mm,
said, "You have a choice. You can either still be a physician or you can choose to do something else. The problem is you cannot stay as you are
mm,
because you're annoying yourself and you're annoying the family." And when she put it that way, I thought, I am being my worst enemy. I'm making myself suffer more by being indecisive and by being afraid. So stepping back and saying the fear of the unknown and the fear and the work of going into another residency, is that as painful as being where I am, or is it worse?
mm,
And at the point where that director told me that I was going to be relegated to nights, weekends, and holidays, while I also was working in the ICU, I thought, no, this is the wake up call that
yeah,
I can't allow that to happen. And to boot, when I started doing applications to other positions without the residency training, the only ones that I was getting a bite on were places that I didn't want to live. It wasn't paying really well, and the shifts were horrible. So, if I was going to make a change in my life and really step into that next phase where I knew I wanted to be, I had to woman up and just do it. So it's having that conversation with yourself. It is gathering the chutzpah, to use an old New York term, and
yes,
the cojones, as it were, to go forward and say, I'm bad off now. I can't get much worse, and I deserve better. End of
yes.
sentence.
But also, it requires a recognition that you're not stuck. Because again, I
Yeah,
think
you're
that's where
not.
so many people stay. They think, okay, I have to stay here. This is what it is. But you
Mhm.
recognize that you actually had options. And I love that conversation that you had with your mother. That, pretty much, moms have a way of laying things on the line. And,
Yes, she
and I
did.
like that she told you, look, you can whine and complain and make everybody miserable, or you can do something about it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
and you did something about it. But now you have reinvented yourself more than once. So
more than once.
tell us
Yes.
about the next iteration.
Well, my husband laughs at it and calls it the ongoing flemissance because I keep reinventing and I keep
Yes.
rebirthing. So, after doing emergency medicine, bedside was fun. In the ED was great. But then there were also leadership opportunities. Middle child. I loved knowing that I had a voice, I had a say, and that I could help things move forward, make things better. So at first, I started with EMS. I think that's a natural landing point for a lot of ED docs. After that, I decided, there's this spot on the Board of Health in the county. Why not? I used to
Hmm.
be an internist. I'm still a doc in the county. Maybe I can have enough of an input and an insight. I can learn some stuff. Who knows where that'll get me? When I was an internist at one point, I swore I was going to work at the CDC or the NIH and cure the common cold. So why not go back to the health department? I've also been the chair of the State Trauma Advisory Committee here in Colorado. And that was another step up above what EMS is. I was on the practice advisory committee here, but the trauma advisory is more of, especially in this big state where a lot of it is rural and a lot of it is frontier. When we talk about the miles between here and, say, Telluride, on the map, it looks like it should be a straight line north. I have to go west to come back to get to there. And that on the ground makes transport and disposition and transfer of patients very difficult. A lot has to happen by fixed wing or helicopter. And being able to be someone at the table who said, we need to recognize the fact that the majority of the population doesn't live in Denver, doesn't live in Colorado Springs or in Grand Junction, and we need to serve them better. How can we support our EMS agencies and our communities better? That has been magnificently rewarding work. Um, I became the CMIO at one of the little hospitals here by default. They were going with a specific platform for the EHR. And because I'd traveled as part of my work and trying to actually pay off the last of the student loans, I had experience with it. So by default, they were like, well, you know the system. Maybe you can help us implement it.
So I want to stop you
And
for just a
mhm,
second
yes,
because
ma'am.
all of the audience is not necessarily physicians. So
Oh, sure.
tell us what CMIO and
Ah, thank
EHR
you.
are. Just
Thank you for the reminder. Yes. CMIO is the Chief Medical Information Officer. So I would, as the physician strategist who was speaking to how this electronic health record, how we were taking things off of paper and putting them digital in the computer to make them more accessible, hopefully reduce errors because doctor's handwriting usually was really horrible, but
right.
also helping to try and make that the one source of truth. So everybody, the surgeon, the ear, nose, and throat, the pediatrician, everybody be looking at the same information and making the decisions there. It's what, if you are a patient or if you've been a patient, it's what the portal gets fed by, all of that information in there. And how I ended up working for the tech side of the whole thing is as we implemented and as they changed and as they optimized and improved on the system, it was very evident that the people that were making the recommendations weren't working with the system. So they weren't the
Mhm.
nurses, they weren't the docs, they weren't the techs or the MAs, the medical assistants and everybody working with it. And it showed because they'd move stuff around and you'd be playing Where's Waldo instead of,
Right. Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
care of patients. And I think they got tired of me calling them out. And one day they made me an offer I couldn't refuse and said, would you work with us? You can still live at home, but can you work with us and help us to understand how we can make this better? And again, never looked back. That was about 10 years ago. Off and on, I was working as a consultant with them, and now I work full time. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So how do you know when it's time to move to something different? Because
Ooh.
it doesn't sound like you were really looking for anything necessarily at that moment in time. It seems
Mhm.
like it was just one of those things that kind of evolved into into an opportunity. Because you
Yeah.
were pointing things out to them. So how do you know? Because again, you've reinvented several times. How do you know when it's time to change?
Mhm. Thank you for pointing that out because there are some backstories to some of those that were the kick in the butt that I needed to make that decision and to notice that, what's the word? That I wasn't satisfied,
Hmm.
that things were starting to get dull and uninteresting and not inspiring like they had been. When I first got into, especially ER, I couldn't wait for the next person to come through the back door. My shifts were all amazing. I mean, I would go to the gym so I could have the endorphin rush, so I could go in there and I could work my night shift. I love night shifts and I still love my night nurses. After a while, though, that grind does begin to grind on you. And it became evident after a bit that I started thinking, I should honestly be asleep at this time of night.
Mm,
It will eventually affect my health.
yes.
I really have maybe a half a day on the weekends because Saturday I would spend sleeping. Sunday, I'd wake up kind of groggy, and around noon on Sunday, I'd start making sense and being human. And then all of a sudden, it was Monday morning, and I was going to sleep in the afternoon for my next night shift. So I started noticing where I was cutting myself short, and I was also not present for my husband and our dogs. We don't have kids, but we got a bunch of dogs, and there were no weekends away, much like how you do with your business. There was really, you had to kind of squeeze it in. In
Yes.
fact, we got married on a holiday weekend because it was a holiday weekend, and we took those 3 days because that's how bad the shifts were and the
Right.
staffing was. And those accommodations over a period of time made me think we can do better and I can do better, even though this is
Yes.
fun. And then it was also recognizing that, again, there are other choices. What excites me? What do I love to do? What could I spend hours doing?
Mm.
What are the things within the hospital organization that make my skin kind of crawl or make me feel like I'm playing small? Or you kind of go, it's not supposed to go like that just because I happen to be
Yeah.
physician while brown or
Right.
physician while female.
Right.
And after a little while, you start putting it together and saying, okay, I can stand here and I can fight it, see if I can make it change, see if I can, turn the course of this and influence the culture. And I know that I did that to a certain extent at all the places I've been. But sometimes you think, can I potentially, by moving elsewhere into a bigger role, a more broad role, something with broader impact and more of a stage, can I be an example to others that this is possible? Much like how you're giving me this
Yes.
opportunity here tonight. All
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things combined start to get into your head, and you think, I owe it to myself. But then, if I'm really going to be true to myself as the mentor, as the example that I want to be, I need to also do it so that others can see that it's possible.
Yeah, you know what? You just dropping too many things too fast for me. So I'm gonna I want to capture some of those things though, because there were some really great points in there. The first is just an observation, and it seems that each thing kind of led to the next thing. And so, sometimes we feel like we might be wasting our time in a particular place or that things didn't go well, but it's always working in our favor. It's always building us up and preparing us for the next step. So I love that part that it seems like in your journey that each thing was preparing you for the next thing. The other thing that you said that I really liked was that you took the time to consider what you liked, what you wanted, what you enjoyed, what like made your heart sing. And I think so often we don't take the time to ask ourselves that. And I think professionally, especially, we don't necessarily think we're supposed to do that.
No.
People think we just have this misconception that work is supposed to be drudgery, right?
Hmm.
That it's supposed to be hard and we're just supposed to live for the weekend and live for vacation. But that's not living.
No.
Most of our life is spent in work, whatever our vocation
Hmm.
is. And it's time that we recognize that we have the right, the privilege to actually enjoy what we do.
Totally. And on that point, Doc, the other thing that's interesting as you were speaking, I thought to myself, we also have a lot of guilt in
Mm,
admitting that we were wrong and that we should leave. It feels selfish to choose ourselves. And we see that men do it all the time.
mhm.
Men do it all the time. And sometimes they are very direct about it. Sometimes they're um, very open and very loud about it. We tend to feel guilty, like we're abandoning our patients, we're abandoning our team, we are leaving the organization without somebody to fill the void. Trust me, the organization had the void. As a friend
Right.
of mine said, and I hope she's listening, she's amazing. She used to say, and when she said it, I had no response. She said, I was looking for a job when I found this one. She says, believe me, when I go, they will fill this happily and they will go on. And I thought, she's brave and she's brilliant. And every single time I hesitate to write that letter or make that meeting and say, I love you guys, but for myself, I have to go on to the next thing. I think about what she said. And that's been 2 decades ago. The job was there before you got there. That's how you found it. They filled it with someone before you. You're now filling it, and someone will fill it after you, guaranteed.
Yes.
Patients were there before you. They will exist even after you. They will have been there since the days of Hippocrates and before that. So
Yes.
there's no guilt. There should
Right.
not be any guilt unless it's the guilt of not serving your own needs and thinking that you're deserving and that you're worth it, worth being happy.
Right. And making yourself a
Mhm.
priority. That's
Absolutely.
that's like the hitting the nail on the head is that
Mhm.
you deserve just as much to be a priority in your own life as you do, more so than the way that we prioritize other people and their wants and their needs and their desires because nobody's going to do it for you. Until you decide to value yourself enough to say, I'm important. It was the other thing I was going to point out from before. You talked about getting married on a holiday weekend because you were working around the ER schedule. And
Mhm.
that's what we do. We build our lives, we make our lives, our real life fit into our work life, but that's just
Mhm.
not the way it's supposed to be. To
No.
me, work is supposed to be complementary, not like the center stage.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be something that we do, but it's not who we are.
No. And that's a great point, too. I was reading somewhere where over 80% of folks, when interviewed, and they say, tell me about yourself, they'll start with what they
Yeah.
do as opposed to who they are. And I thought, how many times have I done that? And I've
Yes.
been trying my best to make a conscious effort of, I'm Michelle Flemmings, and going on from there to something else as opposed to what I am. I'm a job. I'm passionate about self empowered career advancement for women.
Yes.
How do I do that? I speak on stages, I go on podcasts, all of those sorts of things. And I say, and I come at that by way of experiences that I've had as a physician and a woman of color. And so far, that's landed very well, especially in networking, starting
Yeah.
with what about you is your why? Why are you
Yes.
here? What are you directed at? What are you passionate about? It brings people in, it makes them literally lean into the conversation.
Yeah, it does because that's your superpower, right? So, I
Absolutely.
mean, there's a million doctors here in the United States. So just saying I'm a doctor, big whoop, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That says absolutely nothing about who you
Mhm.
are and about what's important to you and how you bring value to the world around you.
Mhm.
So, I think that that's right. And then, at my retreats, one of the things I talk about as far as us not becoming who we were created to be, one of the reasons is we don't know who we are. And,
Mhm.
and I mean that in a big way. So we don't know like we don't get in touch with who we really are, what's really important to us, what our values are, but we also don't recognize our power, our inherent power, our inherent worth, our inherent value that we bring to all situations. I did a puzzle exercise with the ladies at the retreat in Grand Cayman a few weeks ago, and I kind of tricked them. I had a puzzle made with a big puzzle with a photo of each woman's face in the puzzle, and I actually held back some of the pieces. So I had them gather around the table, put the puzzle together, and after a while, they realized that there were pieces that were missing. And I didn't admit that there were pieces missing. But eventually they got it all together except these empty pieces. I mean, these missing pieces. And so I brought them out and I handed each woman the piece of her face. And I said, the world is incomplete without you, without your voice, without your presence. And just like we can kind of see what this puzzle looks like without your piece, it's not the same. It's not as full, it's not as vibrant, it's not as beautiful. And, until we learn to recognize our true, like who we really are, our true worth, our true value, and know that we have something to bring to the table. Because I think that's a lot of it too, that we often end up feeling like somebody's doing us a favor, right? They give us a job. Oh, they did us a favor. They're not paying you as much as everybody else. Well, that's okay. I'm just happy that they gave me a job. No, you're deserving of that and more.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better. And it's interesting too, is when you lead with the what I do, you also invite people to then build their own expectations and
Mm,
bring their preconceptions about what that means. And depending on who you're speaking with, you could be, greedy doc makes a whole lot of money, or you could
yeah.
fall into the last doctor I saw, I didn't trust, they lied to me. And now you're fighting to get past all of those stereotypes and those things that they've built up in their minds. No, the full of you is difficult. I'll be 65 my next birthday in July. And there are still pieces out there that I haven't found and I haven't turned over to realize where does it fit. Because when we do puzzles, we try to turn over all the pieces to
Yes.
see where it could fit. And there are still some that I know are out there that I just haven't gotten to. What I do love, though, is that I've arrived at a place after all of these years where I have come into my power, where I also have folks like yourself included who are in this circle that are going to hold up a mirror to me and go, Michelle, you're doing all these great things, but did you also consider this thing over here? We think that you would be good because, or, Michelle, that thing that you're running after, it's not quite right for you. And this is why, because this isn't the real you that you think you are. So that's another thing that I think is very important is if you're feeling stuck, tap your inner circle. Everybody has a crew of friends, girlfriends, family. My mom, like that story we
Yeah.
told before,
Yes.
who are going to tell you the truth no matter what. And it's going to come from that position of loving and always supporting you. And that's vitally important for anybody in any position in this world, especially now. It's very important to have them there to help you.
So you kind of hit on one thing. You breezed by another iteration of you that I know about that is not in your bio, and that's the fact that you coach professional women. Tell us because I heard you slide when you talked about how you introduced yourself. You slid your mission in there a little bit. Tell us, in this spotlighted way, what it is
Sure.
that you're doing now and who you're doing it for and how you're doing it.
Well, while I'm still working full time, I have the privilege of being in a lot of industry events and on a lot of industry stages. And what I've noticed is that women, and especially women of color in healthcare, in information technology, and in STEM, especially when it is a very male dominated portion of the world and of the field, we tend to shrink back. We tend to play small. As you said, Doc, we tend to apologize for being there, for taking up room, for having the knowledge. Sometimes we even hide the knowledge and let others take the credit. And it hurts me. It hurts me to see that because it's happened to me. As I told my story before about the director who came back and was like, no, no, you can't quite, even though I was that good. So, what I've decided in this stage of life is we don't have kids. It's a legacy. I've always mentored, I've always taught residents, medical students, etc. And so, what I do now is I coach women to be self-empowered and guide their career. HR is not coming to help. They have cut those departments. They're not doing it for you. Your boss has got other things on their mind, and sometimes they're afraid that you could actually either take their job and get them disemployed or become their boss. So their motivations are a bit different.
Yes.
And so what I do is I do bespoke one-on-one coaching with women and women of color, especially in those fields, but I've taken on others who are not necessarily in those exact fields, who are looking to figure out what is my voice? How can I align my passions with my work and be unapologetic, step into the conversation with confidence, not get overspoken, not have to worry about being labeled as difficult or too ambitious or, God forbid, bitchy, because that does come
Mhm.
out, and help them to realize that next step in their journey. Because a lot of us say it's not possible because the workplace says it's not, or because society says it's not. And if we keep thinking that way, we won't ever get to a
Right.
point of pay equity or pay parity. We'll never get to have more than about, I think it's now 1.4% of the Fortune 500 CEOs are Black women. Latinas are a little worse off than we are. Women altogether, it's probably somewhere between 4 and 6% now. But considering how much of the population we make up, our
Right.
skills, our education, our expertise, there's no excuse why across the board we don't occupy more positions of power. I mean, we just had an election
Oh
that
God.
also showed how close and how hard. And politics aside, how magnificent would it have been to have had a woman president in my lifetime? It
Yes.
would have been amazing. you know. Um, so sitting here and letting people lament and not do, and listening to all the stuff that they have on Facebook and on LinkedIn, I thought, maybe this is God telling me I need to speak up. So I'm on LinkedIn and I post about these sorts of things. And I also have a newsletter. And then I also coach.
Excellent. Excellent. So it's the
Mhm.
perfect time to tell people where they can find you. You mentioned LinkedIn, but where else, if they're
Mhm.
interested in maybe working with you as a coach, how can they find you?
Certainly, LinkedIn is actually the best place to find me and DM me there. It's titled and it's really bright. It's got me in a pink blazer and it says working while female across the top. It's
Okay.
very festive because I figure working while female should not be drudgery, which is what we're mostly experiencing now. If you
Right.
find me on Facebook, it still says Michelle Flemmings, or I think it says Dr. Michelle Flemmings, but either way, it's going to look like me, only in a pink blazer.
Okay. Now, the other thing I want to point out about you, because you mentioned that you're going to be 65 your next birthday, which is
Yes,
amazing.
ma'am.
You know, it's like I
Thank you.
don't know 65 where, as they say. But the fact that you're still changing and reinventing because again, we have a lot of misconceptions and excuses. And so there are some who would say, you're 65, you should be retiring. What are you doing? Why are you doing yet entering yet another field, serving in a different way?
Mhm,
There's that. And then there are the people who say, I'm too old, I can't do anything else. That time has passed for me. So
mhm.
what do you say to those folks?
I'm honoring myself and my ancestors doing this, and I'm honoring the future generations. My great 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 grandmother on my mother's side was a slave. Her name was Matan. She ended up in Jamaica. She is a part Maroon, which is still an independent tribe up in the hills of Jamaica. My grandmother on my mother's side, it's interesting that it all goes down that maternal lineage. But
Mhm.
my grandmother on my mother's side was the oldest of 8 children. One was stillborn, so they had 7. I didn't find out until about maybe 5 years ago that they were orphaned, which explains why my grandma had maybe the equivalent of a 6th grade education, and she was a matriarch down to her core because that's
Mm,
what she did. She raised the others. My mother was a teacher. And my aunt, her big sister, was a nurse. And what they used to always tell me, and my grandma would tell me this occasionally, is we in the current generation are the shoulders upon which the next generation stands to see the future and what they're capable of achieving. So my mom worked until she was 65, and after that, she also did work and mentored children because
mhm.
she believed that education, and this is something that's also deep in my DNA, education is the way up and out to the next level of whatever it is you're trying to achieve. So I don't think that I'm quite done. I know that I'm done at the bedside. I spent 37 years there, so more than half my life. This is another way of still helping in healthcare to be somebody who supports the women who are having difficulties navigating the system. Maybe help them avoid some of the potholes or what they like to call microaggressions, which are anything but micro,
Yeah.
and still go on and become successful and confident in their field. So I think that's the roundabout story of I'm not quite done yet. And there are still a
Okay.
lot of folks out there who could use a little Aunt Michelle in their life to help them
Yes.
and enable them to be confident and go forward.
So now you mentioned mentoring. Did you have
Mhm.
mentors along the way? Did you have people that empowered you to be this person who you are today?
I did. And in retrospect, the first one was my grandma. And the only time that she told me something that made me feel like I was going to disappoint, but I was still capable, is when I used to tell her I was going to become a physician. And it was because she was older and she was a bad diabetic. And she looked at me and she says, "And you're going to make us all proud. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, by the time you get there, I'm going to be gone." And she was right. I'm named after my grandma, which is why she also is so powerful in my life as a guide and as an inspiration. My mom was my next mentor. Her big lesson was find your bliss, find your happiness.
Mm,
It's some of the last words she said to me before she passed away. But she says, anytime that you can go forward and you have a fork in the road, choose the one that makes you the most happy.
mm.
Because that happiness, that satisfaction, that inspiration is what you're going to need when things don't go exactly as planned. And then after that, I had two really brilliant ones. Marianne Legato was a cardiologist at St. Luke's Roosevelt. And I didn't realize it then as a young intern that she was mentoring me. She is
Mm,
still on LinkedIn. She doesn't write much, but she went on to do some of the first studies about women's cardiology and women's heart medicine and how our hearts and how MIs and heart attacks and those things manifest differently and how we need different treatment. The other one was Bernadine Healy. Bernadine Healy, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but she used to be the head of the the American Heart Association. No, I'm so sorry, the American Red Cross. And she was also one of the deans at Ohio State when I was a resident. And she was another one who said, you know, Michelle, it's difficult being female in this profession. And she says, I can only imagine how difficult it is when you're doing this and you're a woman of color. She says, but don't let anybody ever tell you that because of any of those things, you're handicapped. She says,
yes.
always remember that somebody valued you and put you in a position where you could learn, where you could get the training and the skills you needed. And do not let anybody ever put that in doubt or try to debase you in this world, because that's on them. That's their fear. And I thought, she's brilliant.
Wow. So now it sounds like, these were people who were just naturally in your life. But,
Mhm.
but a lot of times now, at least I know for myself going through medicine, sometimes it was a very lonely journey, and there
Very true.
weren't ready mentors around. So if there are not people who are in proximity to you, how do you suggest people go about finding a mentor?
Much like your podcast, I think this is a place where you can find and be in a safe space and reach out, because between the two of us, I guarantee you, we know somebody who could mentor just about anybody who's listening, whether it was one of us or one of our circle of friends. Sometimes it requires maybe going into some of the, if you're in a physician, going into some of the local physician groups. There are often senior docs there who are very, very willing to help. They may also be males. They may be an ally, may not be a female. If you have a church, they may not understand exactly what the industry is, but they know the trials and tribulations of being female and being of color in this world. And there are some elders in the church who have an amazing amount of insight and foresight to help you move forward. After that, there are also groups on LinkedIn or on Facebook, and test out the waters. Maybe they have something to say that's going to resonate. Maybe after a little bit, you go, you know, this isn't where I need to be. Maybe you do need a coach. You know, take this free discovery and see if it's a match. See if they speak the language that you need to learn, and go from there.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really delightful
Mm.
conversation. I knew it would be because, like I said, you're such a wealth of knowledge and experience, and and I just love your spirit. The fact that you have done so much and blazed the trail literally for the rest of us, but also that no, that you still want to give back and you're still giving back and grooming us to be able to pick up the mantle. So I absolutely, I appreciate you. I appreciate your work and your contributions to medicine, to women in medicine, to women of color in medicine. So thank you so much for honoring me by being on the show today and having this conversation with me. And again, for the tremendous work that you do and the tremendous gift that you are to the healthcare community.
Rita, thank you. And on this Thanksgiving week, I was talking about gratitude and how sometimes it's difficult to give and to receive.
Yes.
I'm going to take my own best advice and thank you. It means a lot for someone like you to give me such high praise so freely. So thank you. That's made my day.
You've earned it, my dear. Absolutely. So, thank you again. Thank you for coming here. I want to say to all of you guys watching, happy Thanksgiving. Dr. Michelle reminded me that it is Thanksgiving week. I am deeply appreciative of you guys watching. Please share this episode. If you know of a professional woman who is maybe struggling in her career, who is not, knows it's not really working, but doesn't feel like she can make a change, maybe Dr. Michelle's story can be an inspiration to her, because we always have the power to reinvent our lives over and over again. We are never stuck. We just decide to stay stuck. But the reality is that you are never ever truly stuck. You have the power to change your life. So thank you again for sharing your story with us and for being such an inspiration to us. Um, just a quick reminder: the goal setting workshop is this weekend, Saturday, November 30th at 11 o'clock Eastern. The link to register is going to be in the comments. After this discussion, it should be all the more obvious why we need to set goals, because we have to get in touch with what's important to us, and we set goals so that we make sure that we are making space in our lives for the things that matter to us. Because if we're not careful, our careers, the people around us will take, and there won't be anything left for you. And that's just not living. That's not the life that you want for yourself. And so in setting goals, it puts you in the driver's seat. You get to choose. You decide what's important to you. You decide what you pursue. And in effect, you decide what your life is going to look like. So I would love to host you this weekend, Saturday, November 30th, 11 o'clock Eastern. Again, the link is in the comments. Thank you for joining us tonight. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like and share this episode. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Michelle. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharita. This was my honor.
Good night, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.